In today's video, we're going to do some basing and make bases for my Death Guard army. Okay, so in today's video, I'm going to do a little bit of basing, and what I was fortunate enough to run into is a gentleman was selling his Death Guard army completely painted. And as you can see in this picture here, it included quite a number of things, and they're all nicely painted. They're definitely battle ready painted, and so now that gives me the advantage of having an army that's completely ready for competition. Of course, our stores are all opening up now, so competition and games are going to start. So I have a whole army that I can go there, a competitive army, and play with. So the only issue on any of this is none of the bases were done. So although I don't think that's necessary to play, I do want to make some nice bases for all of them. So as you can see, this one here has green overspray from the basing on the color here, but the person concentrated on painting everything really nice, but just never, I think, got around to the time to do the basing. So that's what I want to do. So I've tried out a couple of things, and I'll show you some of the stuff I tried here. So the first one is I tried this mud base here, and I didn't like the mud. I mean, it looks okay, but I did want some type of arid landscape for them. So my next step was I got some Agrellan Badlands, and that cracks really nice and gives it a nice effect. And then some Nurgle rot paint here to give the oozing, slimy marshes area for them, which I think is perfect for them. And the final result is I'm going to end up with some that are going to look like this. So I'm going to add some skulls to some of them, not all of them, but some of them will have some skulls, some tufts, and then of course various amounts of and sizes of the Badlands ground, or the Nurgle rot little ponds or oozing ponds around them. So this is what I'm going to go for. Okay, so to start the basing, I could actually buy just a bunch more bases and do that, but I'm just going to go ahead and pull these guys off the bases here. Now, I've pulled some off before, and they're glued down pretty good. They are definitely attached well. But what I'm going to use is this dental tool here, and you could easily use an X-Acto blade. But what you want to do, and I don't know how well I can show this to you on camera, but I want to put my base and have my base so that the base only is contacting the ground here as I work my blade on underneath the feet. So the blade is actually going to go underneath the shoe like that. Let me get my finger out of the way here so you can see, and then I'm going to work this blade back and forth. Now I don't want to do it like this, because if I slip I'm going to hit my hand, and you do have to put a lot of pressure in here to cut into that and to cut into this, and especially if you're using the X-Acto blade, you definitely don't want to come anywhere close to hitting your finger. So I'm just going to hold that down there. So you may not be able to see it too well, and I apologize for that, but I'm just going to go ahead and remove these. And if you are using an X-Acto blade, you definitely want to make sure that you have some type of protective eyewear, because the blades can break. So just be careful when doing this and do the best that you can. That foot was rather easy compared to what I'm sure this one is going to be much more difficult, because it's a complete flat foot down on there. Yeah, this one is really glued in well. Now you don't want to move it back and forth like that, because you're going to break stuff. So you want to work your way around it as well as you can. And by rocking this back and forth, I slowly get into it. And it is going to be time consuming. There's no doubt. Oops, no doubt about it. See, I even cut myself there on the gun. So this is definitely going to be time consuming. There we go. So we have that one off. Now, the nice thing is that this shows you exactly where the footprint is going to be on this guy. Now, not that this will be the exact same base, but at least I have a good idea as to where I want to put the Badland earth around there, where I want that to cover on the base, because I know somebody's going to sit on that correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of them and come back to you when I have at least 5 of these off, because that's how many I'm going to work with on my base holders here. So I'll be back in a minute when that's all done. Okay, now for this project, I'm going to need some way to remove the characters off the bases. So I have this dental tool that I can use, and I have an X-Acto plate. Now once they're off the base, the basing is going to start by adding color and adding layers of earth to it. So for the earth, I'm going to be using the Agrellan's Badland, and then that is going to get a wash, well, that is going to get a dry brush of Necron compound dry, and then some Reikland Fleshshade is going to go over that to add some depth and fill in the shadows. And before all that starts, well, after that gets laid out into these areas like this, I want to paint a base color down here underneath this rot, and that is going to be the Caliban green. It's going to go underneath that, and then the Nurgle rot is what is going to be the main color for all of the oozing little bits of oozing ponds that are located there. In addition, you might want to use some skulls. Now these I've got out of the Citadel Skull pack. Let me see if I can. Citadel Skulls, which is the box of skulls. And then I have some grassland tufts here that just stick on tufts, and these are dry grassland tufts, arid tufts, whatever it may be called. And I think these are from Army Painter. And for the skulls, I have a base coat of Corax white on them, and then while they're on the sprue there, put on a coat of Flayed One's flesh, and then some Screaming Skull. So, and something to hold your bases. You don't necessarily need that, but I have 5 of these, so I'll be working with 5 bases at a time. But just sometimes it's easier to work with a base that's on something like this. And that's the stuff that you're going to need for this. So let's get back at it. Okay, so I have my 5 bases removed, and 2 of the bases have these little lock-in pieces here for the soldiers to snap onto the base. And I think in this case, I have done a couple bases already, and I did put the Agrellan Badland around that. Then slide this in afterwards, but I do have that little green showing. So I think in this case, what I'm going to do is on these guys is I'm just going to cut that off. I'm just going to cover right over that with the basing material and just cut this piece right off here, just like this. So that way I just have a nice flat surface to work with here. And that will just go down to, so now I can use whatever base I want. So I could actually, place this guy on this base if I wanted to at this point. So anyway, I think that's going to be my best bet, is to cut those off and just to fill this on over with that Badlands, or whatever it takes. Okay, so as you can see, I got my bases in my holder, and I'm going to be using this texture tool here from Citadel. Now this is really an overpriced piece of plastic, but you probably could do the same thing with some dental tools if you happen to have them, or you can buy some relatively cheap dental tools that look like this. You could probably do the same thing, but I just happen to have this here, so I'm going to use that, and I'm going to first put down some Agrellan's Badland. Now I'm not worried about priming this. This already has some paint on it, but all I want to do is I just want to get some layers of this Badlands on here. So as you can see, I'm just going to put a goop of it right down the middle here, cover up that little spot there. Now I'm thinking that I'm probably going to go through quite a few bottles of this stuff, and I probably could put glue that up with something, or fill that hole in, or that gap in the base with something, which I probably will do on if I have a lot of them, but I think I only have like 6 or 7 of them that are like this. So then just tamp it down and just create your wherever you want your pools to be. Now in some of these I will have you know, some won't have very many pools, like when I do all the pox walkers, I think I won't have so many pools for them. But I think, you know, I just want to get a couple spots that are flat. Scrape off the edge right here. I'm going to scrape off this edge. So then I'm going to go to the fine side here and just sort of pat this down, just sort of get a nice smooth, if I can. Actually, I think it's smoother to use this side, at least for me. Okay, so that's the first step. You have to let that dry for, let me refocus here so you guys can see it. There we are. So you have to let that dry for a little while. So I'm just going to go on to the next one. And again, I can see where the feet were on these, so it makes it easy to figure out where you want to put this stuff. It doesn't have to be super thick, so, but I do like to build it up some. Now, if you wanted to, you could actually, you know, put a skull, bury a skull in there, push something in there if you wanted to. But I'd make sure that the thing was completely painted the way that you want it before you put that in. So this one here will just have some goo on the front here, or maybe even the back. Okay, so I got my 5 bases here, and you can see that the cracks really show up quite well in the Agrellan Badlands. So the next thing I'm going to do is use the Necron compound and just go ahead and dry brush this using the Citadel small dry brush. A little bit on the brush, and then I don't go super dry on this because I want to cover it relatively quickly, but you can see here how much goes across, and just go at different angles so that you cover all the high grounds. And once it stops applying relatively easy, I just put a little bit more on there, and as you get more and more of it on the brush, it will stay on there longer and just get soaked into the brush and seem to work a little better. To do this as the next step, you have to be careful though, because sometimes this stuff will come up, and if it does, I've used CA glue to glue the pieces back down, and that seems to hold them. But just a little bit like that. We don't want too much, but we do want the highlights to show. And I'll just continue doing the same thing on the rest of them. And if your brush happens to give a little bit too much on it, just wipe it off. You see I got a bad smear there, but that'll be fine. Okay, so once the Necron compound is finished, I'm going to go everything with Reikland Fleshshade. That's going to give us this little bit of a browner color here. But I was thinking that I might try one with this Beal Tan here. See how well that works. I'll try this shade here, just to give it a little bit of green. I don't know how that's going to come out, but I'll try maybe this one. I'll try that. So let's try that one first. And you can experiment, you know, but I figure I have the ooze anyway, so I might as well try see if I give it a green shade, see what it looks like. Now you can, if you want, do the dry brushing afterwards. I don't know how, I might want to do that after I apply this green, because I'm not sure how much that's going to change the color. I know that on the Reikland Fleshshade, I always do the dry brushing ahead of time, because then that just sort of blends it all in once I add this. And you should let this dry for at least an hour before you, well, you can continue on to the other parts, but you should let this dry if you're going to do anything over it. And the Reikland Fleshshade, you can give a pretty liberal coat of it. And you definitely want to get a lot in the cracks because that's going to really accentuate the cracks here on the surface. Darken up, add quite a bit of contrast. Don't worry about getting on these parts here because you're going to be painting that over anyway. Notice that we got a pretty solid crack going down the middle there, and on this one I think that's where our little groove is there, so that allowed it to have a nice bit of cracking going on there and adding some character to it. Although these have pretty good definitions of the Badlands earth. Okay, so now that that's all dried, like I said, I like doing the dry brushing first, then the shade afterwards, because it sort of blends everything in, brings down, you know, those really bright highlights that the silver has, but still leaves enough there for where you can see them. Here's our green, so that's looking kind of cool compared to the brown, so it'll be interesting to see how that looks afterwards. So the next step is Caliban green, and that's going to be down for the floor of our swamp area. Now you won't be seeing much of that, but it still would be nice to have it there just to add that color. So I just move it around and then just run right along the edge there, right up to the edge of the base. And I don't want to get too much of this. I really don't want to get much of this at all on the brown. I just want to go right up to the brown. And then, okay, once I have all those painted, I'm going to let them dry completely before I move on to the next step. My Caliban green is drying. I'm going to put some Flayed One Flesh. It's going to be a heavy dry brush onto some of these skulls because you want to paint them completely. Not the easiest thing at times to paint on the sprue, but they are not easy to hold on to, and you don't want to do too much painting once you glue them onto the base. So for me, that's just easier. Now when you cut them off, you're going to have a little point on top that will not be painted, which you'll have to take care of. And if it's on top, you can take care of it once you glue it into the base. That shouldn't be a problem. Now, next color I'm going to use is Screaming Skull. That's going to be a very light dry brush, so I want to make sure that I clean out the brush pretty good. And this one is just going to go across the front parts to give me some highlights. Glue these skulls down, so before I do, I want to scrape off just a little bit of this green paint here. Make sure you can see that. Get down to the plastic. I find this easier to do than gluing them down before I paint the green. Now the next color is not going to make that much difference because it's going to be the green, the Nurgle green, so it's going to be our swamp material, so we want that to flow around the skulls. So, but this green we really don't want on the skulls here. Just take a little drop here, put that down, and just drop the skull right on it, and then give it about 15 to 20 minutes to dry. Press down a little bit on it. We have a skull that looks like that. And we have another one up front here. It looks like that. Alright, so now it's time to add in some little Nurgle rot right here. And that's going to be filling in to give our little swamp a really horrible look, we hope. Or at least a greenish slimy look, which it does a really good job of. So for this stuff, I like to put it on pretty thick. Now I've seen, I think, a couple videos where they thin it out first and then they put it in, but I've not liked the way that looks when I do that. So I just get the brush pretty full, as you can see here, and I just push it. Now if I'm going up close to something like this skull here, what I want to do is I want to push the liquid into the skull so it's like that. That way my brush is not leaving a brush stroke on the skull, just that liquid bumps into that, and that sort of gives it, you know, of course I've never seen a green toxic swamp before, but I'm thinking that's the way that it would naturally look. Could be totally wrong on that. If those of you out there have seen green toxic swamps, maybe you can leave a comment as to how they look. But so that's what I do, is I put down a nice heavy drop and I sort of push the liquid into it, and then I want to make sure that I keep that pretty heavy, as you can see right here. And then the rest of it just the same way, just big old globs of it just touching down, trying to make it so that I don't leave any gaps in there. Now I will come back and do this twice, so I'll come back and lay up some more of this stuff after this dries. Now because it is pretty thick, you're going to let it dry for about an hour. Yeah, is what I would recommend. And let it dry completely, so when you put the next batch on, it's not interfering with what you have. But I like the way it looks around the skull here. As you can see, it sort of goes in there pretty good. And on stuff like this, where you have a little peninsula there, put the drop right down in the center, and you sort of push it around. Now the tricky part is going to be that little part in between the skull and the land there. That's going to be difficult. So what I'm going to do for that, actually, is I'm going to get my thinnest brush. So again, I'm trying to push the green in. Let me make sure that I have my focus here for you. And eventually, those two meet up like that. There we go. Okay, so these have been sitting here for about an hour, and they're pretty much dry. And as you can see, like on this one here, we start to see some of the dark green showing through even in the thicker parts. Now this one's not too bad. So if you're happy with that, I mean, some of these look pretty good. This particular one, for example, looks kind of nice with just the one coat. But I am going to put another coat on all of them. And I gotta say that the green color ground doesn't look too bad. I'm still going to go with the brown for most of my stuff because I like the warmer color. But this type of ground does look like something that might be around a whole bunch of green ooze coming from the swamp, I guess. So I will just go ahead and put another coat of Nurgle rot on all these and be back in a minute. Here I put a tuff inside the goo while it was wet, so I just basically stuck that down. So any type of tufts that you want to put, I'm just going to go around and just clean up all these edges now. And all it got to be is just smooth. They don't have to be, you don't have to scrape every bit of paint off, just be smooth, so that when we apply our coat of paint around the edge, they'll be finished. Which base fits your guy the best? Place him down, find his location of his feet. Add a little thin CA first. Let that soak into the base material. That's going to help quite a bit. And then we're going to add to his feet the thick CA. Only use CA on this. The plastic glue will not work. And we're going to place him down. And then I'm going to take a little bit of accelerator and add a drop here, just at the base of his feet. Now thin CA is going to soak into the base material and help it bond to the actual base itself a little better. And then that's going to continue the bond up to the thick CA, which is going to fill in any gaps underneath the legs. So as you can see, it bonds pretty quick, and he's down pretty good. Okay, so I have my guys all finished up here. They're glued onto the bases. The glue is dry. They'll let it dry for a little while just to make sure there's no issues. Looks like I might need to touch that up a little bit maybe. But mainly, all I have left now is just to do the rim of the bases, and I'm going to do that in these particular ones with Morfang Brown is the color I decided to go with on them. So all of my bases will be painted in that color. And personally, I like to have the guys on there because I can hold them while I'm doing the base. I mean, you could paint the base like this, you know, and this is what I've done on these bases, but I find it much harder than just having the guys on there. Now I also stick them on top of a old piece of tile that I have here, and you can see all the marks there, because you do get a little extra, and it does tend to want to stick, and so it doesn't stick so easily to the tile instead of rather than putting them on my counter. And I use the side of the brush. That's the way that my preferred method. There are other people out there that I've seen are much better at brush control than I am, so they use the face of the brush like this. I can't do that so easily, and this tends to give me a perfect edge across where I want it. So sometimes you can get it, if you have it cleaned up pretty good, you can get it with just one coat, but almost always I put 2 coats. Okay, so here are the finished bases, and I'm pretty happy with these. I like the way they came out, and it looks like something the Death Guard would be traveling across to achieve their victory. So if you like this video, please do give it a like and subscribe if you can. There'll be plenty more painting and how-to tutorials coming out very soon. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you on the next video.